I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
John Winn Miller is a true Renaissance man, an award-winning investigative reporter, Pulitzer finalist, foreign correspondent, editor, newspaper publisher, filmmaker, screenwriter, and novelist, whose storytelling career has moved from real-world headlines to the shadowed corridors of historical suspense. His newest novel, Miriam in the Shadows, is the third book in his Peggy C saga, following The Hunt for Peggy C, Rescue Run. It's a World War II thriller set in the spring of 1944 as the Allies prepare for D-Day and the Nazis race to turn V-2 rockets into radioactive weapons. At the center of the story is Miriam, a young Jewish mother from Amsterdam, trained by Britain's Special Operations Executive, captured and tortured by the Nazis, and forced into one final mission that may determine the fate of the invasion. John Winn Miller, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I hope those stakes are high enough.
You have had a remarkable career as an investigative reporter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How does that background shape the way that you build a thriller?
I learned to write clearly and to describe a lot of things. When I started in journalism, there was no internet. There was no CNN. CNN was just starting. And when we would be in weird locations, whether Eritrea or Libya, we literally had to describe everything for the readers. So I had to be very observant about what they were wearing, what the weather was like, what things smelled like. So you really reported with all five senses. So I bring that to the novels that I write. And I didn't even start writing novels until I was in my late 60s. I'd been a journalist for almost 40 years and retired twice. And started writing screenplays, none of which sold, but it was a good lesson. And then during COVID, I decided I've always wanted to write a novel. Let's see if I can do that.
What way did screenwriting impact your novel writing?
Journalism is just the facts, ma'am. Screenwriting is more like haiku. It's very sparse, very descriptive. You can only write what the audience can see or hear. You can't do internal dialogue. You've got to convey emotion through other methods. So that really taught me to hammer down on the essence. In fact, I just learned recently that Nobel Prize winner Gabriel Garcia Marquez, all of his novels started as screenplays. He would write a screenplay and then turn it into a novel. So it, in some ways, made it a little easier because I had the plot done, I had the characters. Then I had to learn how to write like a novelist, which is a totally different game. Whereas with a screenplay, you've got a limited canvas. With a novel, it's unlimited. What point of view are you going to use? What is it, third person or is it first person? What do you describe? What do you don't describe? How much background do you give? So I had to learn how to do all of that without overloading the readers with way too much detail, which I tend to do. And
Miriam in the Shadows is the third book in your Peggy C series. What did you want this novel to accomplish that the first two books had not yet explored?
This really gets more into, can you preserve your humanity while fighting inhuman evil? In other words, can you kill Nazis and yet not become one? And so it's a struggle for Miriam. In the first novel, she's a damsel in distress, and she was started out as a minor character who was rescued. The second novel, it's 50-50 between her and Captain Jake Rogers. And in that novel, she's an SOE agent, and Rogers talks to her about the evil of killing people. And she says, I don't kill people, I kill my enemy. And it's stone cold. And then by the third novel, she's really starting to question all of that. Yeah, I'm killing my enemy, but what am I becoming? Am I becoming one like them? So I really explore the bad guys who actually have some goodness to them, who do some decent things, even though they're Nazis, and then good people who have to do bad things for a good cause. So it really explored a lot of issues that I hadn't explored in the first two books.
We're talking with John Winn Miller about his new one, Miriam in the Shadows. His website is John Winn, W-I-N-N, johnwinnmiller.com. Miriam is driven by survivor's guilt, maternal instinct, courage, and trauma. How did you balance her vulnerability with her lethal competence?
Yeah, that is a dichotomy there. It's a paradox. She does what she has to do, but she has to fight through all of these ghosts that she carries with her. She'd survived torture by the Nazis. She'd been rescued by Rogers, and yet the SOE convinces her to go back for one more mission, and she has to struggle with the fear that overwhelms her when she gets in dangerous situations and has to react quickly. Most of my books are based on real stories. So when I give you the details about what the SOE was like or the training was like, that's accurate. And one of the places she trained was called the Gangster School. And she was taught, defense, you're dead. Kill or be killed. There are no rules. And so she has to, again, forget all the regrets and everything else, the trauma, and just survive by doing what you got to do to survive, which means killing some people.
The book asks a really brutal moral question: complete the mission, possibly save D-Day, or save the man she loves. What was the dilemma at the heart of the novel?
Do you rescue lots of people, or do you take care of yourself? Are you willing to sacrifice the ultimate sacrifice other than your own life is the life of a loved one for the higher cause of freedom and defeating the Nazis? So I think it's an issue that readers will wrestle with. What would you do if your wife or your daughter or your son, you either save them or you save the war? And I thought that added a lot of emotion to what could be just another thriller with action scenes and fights and everything like that. I wanted it to have a little bit more nuance and texture.
You bring Ian Fleming into the story.
Yes.
As a naval intelligence officer. What interested you about Fleming before he became the creator of James Bond?
He actually was an agent for naval intelligence during World War II. He got hired because he was a playboy. He was dropping in and out of school, had a bunch of different jobs as a stockbroker and a banker, all of which his mother got him the jobs. He came from a wealthy family, and he was just wandered from one job to the other. And finally, his mother called a friend who just happened to be the head of naval intelligence and said, can you give my son a job? And so he did. He had no qualifications whatsoever other than a brilliant imagination. And before long, he was practically running naval intelligence. And the head of naval intelligence was so unpopular with the 8 other intelligence services that Fleming was the one who negotiated and came up with these crazy plans. And so at one point, they said that he was practically running naval intelligence. And so I did a lot of research on him. I can tell you what he smoked. He had custom-made cigarettes with 3 rings, gold rings on them, because that's what a commander wears on his uniform. He liked his martinis stirred, not shaken, with lots of vermouth and no olives. But he was just the perfect character for me to connect Captain Rogers to MI6 and to a plot that involved the Navy a little bit. He just fit in wonderfully.
We're talking about Miriam in the Shadows, the website, johnwinnmiller.com. Your antagonist, Claude Dansey, is described as a real-life MI6 villain. What made him such a compelling antagonist for the story?
The famous writer Trevor Howard, the historian who was an MI6 agent under Casey, said he's a miserable shit. He's a liar. He's immoral. But others said he was the best of the espionage agents. And one agent, the agent called, a man called Intrepid, William Stevens, said that he had no doubt that Dansey would destroy other people to get his way. So that became a major plot point for me, was Dansey is doing all this dirty deeds in the background, and it's true to the toxic real-life rivalry among Britain's and Americans' intelligence services. So even though it sounds crazy and made up, it's actually based on real history. Some of the books raise the question of whether Dansey betrayed some SOE agents as a way to confuse the Germans about when D-Day was going to be. He's still a very mysterious character, and I have no idea what happened to him after the war, other than he died.
World War II fiction is a crowded field. What do you think gives Miriam's story a distinctive place in that tradition?
It's got a female protagonist, for one thing, a Jewish female protagonist who's a young mother who, as you mentioned, is haunted by survivor's guilt, that she survived and others didn't, which was a common problem among SOE agents who escaped capture. They felt bad about it, and they were ready to go back in. And it also involves a lot of real science, real history, and a real probability that the Nazis were very close to getting a nuclear bomb, but they were definitely close to doing a dirty bomb. And so I weave in a lot of the real characters like Werner Heisenberg and Werner von Braun. And the site for the story is a coal mine. The real place where they were doing the construction was a chalk mine in the same area in northern France. So it's a very different kind of story. There's a lot of tension, but it's based on real stuff. And I tell people that the crazier the escape or the episode seems, the more likely it's based on a true event.
You've spent much of your life chasing facts as a journalist. Is historical fiction a way of getting at truths that nonfiction sometimes can't reach?
Interesting, yes, because I can give my opinion and I can reflect the deeper meaning of things rather than just the facts, ma'am. I can show you the emotion, I can show you the good and the bad in dramatic situations. It's a whole new canvas for me to explore history, which I just love history. I love thrillers, so it's been a lot of fun to do that.
Miriam in the Shadows is the book. We're talking about it with its author, John Winn Miller. Stories have a way of taking on a life of their own. Sometimes they go in directions we don't expect. Was there anything about this story that surprised you?
The whole series surprised me. Like you, I am a pantser. I don't outline and typically know the beginning and the end, and maybe some stuff in the middle. And then I just work my characters into a corner, and then I research a good way, realistic way for them to get out. And the whole series, they say, write what you know. I write stuff I know nothing about. I've never been on a submarine. I've never been on a merchant ship. I haven't been to most of the places I write about. The book actually truly came out of a dream. This is just bizarre. Years ago, my daughter, Allison, who's now an actress, and my wife were watching a really bad movie. I don't know what it was. And I said, I know I can write a better screenplay than this. And so that night, I had a dream. And the next day I woke up, I knew the first scene, I knew the last scene, and I knew the name of the ship, the Peggy C. I have no idea where any of that came from. And so I spent years researching, what the hell, what can I do with this? And again, when I started the first book or the screenplay, the internet was just beginning. There was no Amazon. There was no Google. You had to literally go to the library and find books. Now I can online, I can not only access books, but archives and videos of survivors. And I can even go to the Imperial War Museum and listen to the voices of the characters I use in the book so I can describe what they sound like. So it's all been a surprise to me. And when I finished the first novel and finally sold it after 50 query letters to a publisher and turned it in, he said, "You just need to keep writing." I went, "What?" The first book was hard enough. What am I going to write about now? And luckily, I ran into a book about Dutch bounty hunters who hunted Jews for money. And so, that's interesting. So now how do I get Miriam back into Holland? And then where does Rogers show up? How does he get there? You just start with a premise and then just start doing research. And literally, I would obsess so much on details, probably too much, but I obsessed on what were shoes made of in France, because leather was restricted to the army. So the French people didn't have leather for their shoes. And so I had to do all this research, and I finally found a fashion expert who told me that they used a compound of ground up old pieces of leather and glue and bamboo and other things to make shoes.
It's almost poetic, Miriam in the Shadows. Where did that come from?
There are actually quite a number of either books or articles about the resistance fighters, and they would call them Men in the Shadows or the War in the Shadows, something like that. And so I decided I'll just use Miriam in the Shadows. It is poetic. It doesn't tell you a whole lot about what the book's about unless you've read the first two, but hopefully it will. I liken my writing to, it's Tom Clancy meets Christian Hanna. So it's World War II. It's a woman protagonist. It's got a lot of technology and a lot of history in it. But I came up with one trick, and I've not seen this in other books. In order to not slow down the action too much, I take a big chunk of the background out and put it in chapter notes at the end of the book. So if you want to know more about where the leather came from or what technologies were, what kind of radar the planes had, it's at the end of the book and not in the book. So that made my publisher a little happier.
What does espionage reveal about war that battlefield stories often miss?
On espionage, you do what you have to do. There is no honor. There is no code. It's kill or be killed, spy and spy more. And you sacrifice your own team members for the goal of getting that information. In a battle, you fight to the last man, or you leave nobody behind. In espionage, it's called a wilderness of mirrors. It's you don't know what's true, what's not, who to believe. You know what you need to do. You might have to kill some people. You might have to assume a different identity. Whereas the military is pretty straightforward. The enemy's wearing a uniform, they're in front of you. In espionage, in my books, your allies may be more dangerous than your enemies.
How did writing Miriam change your understanding of courage?
Wow. She does a lot of things I'm not sure I could do. Hemingway defined it as grace under pressure. She shows a lot more grace and quick-wittedness. And doesn't mean you're not afraid. You're afraid, and you may even be trembling with fear, but you carry on and you do what you think is right. That's another issue for me, is doing the right thing. How do you do that when you know it might hurt some people, it might not, or how do you even know what the right thing is? You have to have a moral compass that convinces you this is the right thing and I'm going to do it no matter how much danger I'm in. So again, she was a mystery to me. It just popped out of nowhere, and her character, like I've heard you write about or talk about, they develop their own personality. They tell their story to me, and it's just, okay, I'll go with the flow.
Do you see Miriam as a hero, a survivor, a weapon, or something more complicated?
She's one part of each. She's doing the right thing, but she has to do horrible things to do the right thing. And she is fragile. She's flawed. And yet she continues to carry on with the mission because she believes that she's trying to protect her people, the Jewish people, the and her country and the allies. So you have to be a little bit of everything, I think, if you're going to be. But she's not some macho hero. She's not the Terminator or something like that. She really struggles with how you deal with all of these issues. And she's got to be a good actor. She's got to pretend a lot that she's somebody that she's not. But she's got to pretend like she's interested. There's a German guard who kind of gets puppy love for her, and she has to encourage it without encouraging it too much. And so it's very, I hope, very nuanced and complicated.
What do you hope that readers will take away from their encounter with Miriam in the shadows?
That war is horrible, and we're lucky that we live the way we do. Can you imagine living under a Nazi regime where there's no hope, where you're being starved, where your friends are disappeared into night and fog? That we need to be really grateful for what we have, and we should be alert to attacks on our freedoms and on democracy, that it can be really bad if we don't stand up for the right thing.
Are there more stories to tell in the Peggy C series?
Believe it or not, I'm about a third of the way through volume 4. I mentioned a wilderness of mirrors is what espionage is. And so this one is called The Wilderness of Rats. And it plays on all the various meanings of the word rat, a betrayer, double agent, a bad person. But it also plays off the Nazis at the end of the war criminals escaped to Argentina and South America using rat lines, is what they were called. Those were the escape lines, some of which were organized by the Americans, by the OSS and others, to help really bad war criminals like Klaus Barbie, who was the butcher of Lyon, and then others not maybe so barbarous like Werner von Braun escape. So it plays on all of that. And there's a lot of rats.
What question haven't I asked you that you wish that I had?
Where can I buy your book? I must have it. It's on Amazon. It's on every system. Right now, it's just on e-edition. The hardcover comes out on June the 2nd. My publisher held it up until he wanted it to be near D-Day because it ends on D-Day and it involves D-Day. And there will be an audio version. There's the first 2 books are on sale everywhere, both in hardback, paperback, e-edition, and audio. So
perfectly timed. It's great. Book is Miriam in the Shadows. It's the 3rd in the Peggy C series. I'm very excited that there'll be a 4th. It's written by our special guest, John Winn Miller, and that's his website, John Winn, W-I-N-N, johnwinnmiller.com. This has been great, John. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.